We're live. Hey guys, it's Joel with Coreware. Today, we're going to talk about some really exciting stuff. Compliance. From background checks to forms complete. No, seriously, while we're listening to our compliance corner, just a race. Welcome to the compliance corner. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit. We give people a couple of minutes to show up. Yeah. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk you guys through something that I want everybody to start taking advantage of. When we do webinars, what I'm gonna try to start doing is actually making those webinars questionable. I was just thinking about this, like not questionable as in should you have done that? No, you want to query the webinar so you can go back and say, what did I miss, or summarize this webinar. So I'm going to show you we've got a new page for this, and I say it's new. I think we've had it for a little bit. I'm just kind of telling you about it now. Let's see. We're going to put this over here. So you'll see this is a webinar recap, right? And you'll see you can go and watch the webinar here. So if you click on this, it's going to take you to the webinar. And on this one, Ask Webby. Webby is our webinar know-it-all. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these webinars, at least the important ones, not the ones where it's all jokes, but the important webinars, I'll go and I'll take and I'll build some sort of a bot that you can question. And as you're watching the webinar, I'm trying to build the bots in a way that knows maybe more than it should. So if you get answers that seem too good to be true or seem completely, out of left field, they could be. But it's a good little partner to watch the webinar with, because as you're watching the webinar, if you have a question, you can go in and ask, whatever you want. So I did this earlier. I came over here for this webinar, which I'm still excited about. If you guys do not have an ATM in your shop right now, we actually offer those. So if you're not, that's just free money. Basically, it wouldn't cost you anything if, with the way everything's set up, you're literally getting 50 cents per transaction. So basically, is that small square footage worth it for you in regards to having an ATM on premises? And again, I know people say, well, the fees are outrageous. If I'm at a gun shop and I'm going to spend $700 or $800 on a Glock, some ammo, and maybe some holsters and whatever, and I can get a better deal by using cash, right? I don't have the cash. They have an ATM. It may cost me $4 or $5 to get that money out. I'll pay it. I don't want to drive to the bank. My time is worth more to me than those few dollars that I might spend more for something. And obviously, the discount that you receive by paying cash is probably going to be more than the $3 or $4 that you would have to pay for the transaction. Again, that's an aside. But back to Webby. What I did is I went to Webby. For this webinar, you're just going to click on this link and it's going to take you to this. You do have to have a ChatGPT account. If you don't have a ChatGPT account, you're behind already. It's the ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other tools are just like Google. Everybody's got a Google account, right? You've got I wouldn't doubt if ChatGPT starts doing email one day. Who knows, right? Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to query your emails? Tell me what I missed today. That stuff's coming, but you need to have a ChatGPT account to access these bots. But a ChatGPT account is free unless you want to do the premium. But if you just have a plain ChatGPT account, you'll be able to query the bots that we create for our webinars. So I went here and I said, how much would an ATM cost? Now, we covered that in the webinar. The cost of an ATM is $29.99. The price is standard amount and does not include any special promotions or discounts that may be. That's that. The answer's right. What are the benefits of this? Having an ATM on your premises offers several key benefits, and then it tells you. You may not be thinking like, why would I need a ATM on premises? Well, go in and question things, right? We've never in our history as people, as mankind, we've never been able to have at our fingertips every piece of known knowledge in the universe. and we need to take advantage of it, because if you're not, your competitors are, right? If you're not, your customers are. So your customers are using this as well to find you and to find the products that you offer. Another one I ask, who do I need to talk to get an ATM? Well, go to coreware.com or coreclear.com, right? So use these bots that we're building for, well, use Webby. I'm not going to call him a bot because he's very, very helpful, and I'm very proud of him. He's our little friend, and he knows everything, and he'll probably know everything about what Tony's going to cover today, which is the 5 deadly sins. Actually, there are more than 5 deadly sins, but I'm going to let him go into that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn our music down, because even though it's awesome, because it really is, we don't want to hear it anymore.
Right.
So Tony, what I want you to do is, I want you to, in the most creative and entertaining way possible, I would like for you to tell us what you're going to talk to us about, because I know that for a lot of people out there, anything compliance related either makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, or it depresses you, or I mean, it's just not a positive thing. Anything regulated is really, it's hard to make it fun, but I know that you're going to make it fun, because knowledge is empowering. Yeah, you're going to empower all these people that are watching, and they're going to be able to walk away with this, with some practical tools to avoid these deadly sins. So with that, I'm going to shut up and let you run with it.
Yeah. So thanks, Joel. Yeah, it's the compliance thing can be overwhelming, especially when you look at like a lump sum of information thrown out at you and everything else like that. But the 5 deadly sin things, it's not new. It's been over our heads for a couple of years now with the current administration. And nothing I'm going to present today is anything I've made up here on the spot. This is stuff we've been talking about, and a lot of us in the industry have been talking about over and over and over again. So there's been more people than just me doing these same types of presentations. And the big point is to educate and build that awareness and kind of get the points out there and make people aware of, hey, here's the things that are going down, and here's what's being brought up during inspections that could result in the revocation notice, and try to avoid that and try to do everything right at the beginning of all the processes, so you can avoid this altogether. So specifically, if you don't know what the deadly sins are, we'll kind of go way back to the beginning. We're going to go back to June of 2021. So back in June of 2021, President Biden issued an executive order. Joel, if you would share that presentation for me there. Here's the link you can go to up at the top to look at what that order was, and this is what it was. It was their comprehensive strategy to prevent and respond to gun crime and ensure public safety. And this was the press release that came along with it. And there's a whole bunch of data in here, but specifically what we're talking about is we get down to this points here. And in his executive order, he specifically lays out these 5 points that they are going to consider zero tolerance when it comes to these 5 issues, these 5 points. This is what translated into what we called the deadly sins. And what they're going to do is they are going to beef up inspections and beef up enforcement related around these points of these points of compliance, and again establish a zero tolerance level. So what does zero tolerance of that mean? At a compliance conference in April of 2022, following this, ATF leadership went into details about this. I joke that conference was the deadly sin / frame and receiver conference, because those were the big topics of discussion. And they hammered these 5 things over and over and over again. So it became, and not only hammered these over again, but then kind of went into detail of what these are. So that's what it became. Now, Joel mentioned it went from 5 deadly sins to 10, coming on 10. I've seen there's people presenting are even 11 points now. But even if we go a step further, now that we're beyond that a little bit, this is a direct link directly on the ATF website you can go to and find where it talks about revocation of firearms licenses. And right here, we got a section, basis for revocation. So it hits right here. Here's our 5 deadly sins. This is what came directly out of the executive order. But even the ATF themselves has expanded this list to the following 4. So even if we just go with what the ATF is telling us, that's at least 9. All right. And then we can add in a couple for other information. So while the talk and why have no tolerance and this like that, and you can go back to their press release on the no tolerance policy and say why they're doing it. They're going to target rogue gun dealers. They're going to try to target this firearms trafficking and straw purchasing and do whatever. I mean, the reality is, and granted, my disclaimer here is, am I going to be biased to the firearms industry? 100% I am. But the ramifications of this no tolerance across the board, to all gun dealers, even if you're doing everything right, is 100% a concern and something you should keep in mind of. Because one of the big things when we talked about even going from this executive order into that conference, they want to come out and say that it can be just one violation can result, if it's one of these deadly sin things, can result in a revocation notice. Now, there's a willful clause to this. They're going to tell you the violations are going to have to be willful. But again, define willful and who does define willful, because they'll admit right here the GCA doesn't define willful. So now you're relying on court determinations and everything else. But here's what we can probably tell you. It's not going to be the IOI who's conducting your inspection, no matter how good of a person they may be or not, or how good they may be to work with. They may not have a choice to decide, are you willful or not? This determination may not come until you're in that hearing, until you're in all the follow-up that comes with after you've had the violations and everything. So it's important to, again, do things right at the start of all these processes and everything else. Because mistakes happen. We want to talk about mistakes happen, but again, a lot of the conversations and follow-up to that executive order was, yeah, mistakes happen, but, and this was a direct quote I heard, you can't uncrash the car. So you can have a mistake, and even fix it, and yet still wind up in this situation of your fighting to keep your license. Now, going through the steps to fix something, does that help to prove that you were not willful in that mistake? 100%. So absolutely, you should fix it and go through that. But again, that doesn't mean you're going to get saved from this process. It maybe means you save your license in the long run and everything else like that. But again, there's a possibility you could still get that notice, still have to go through that process, which is going to be stressful. It's going to be hard. And there's people out there that will help you with this. And by far, if you wind up with yourself in that situation, don't try to go it alone. There's a lot of people, a lot of advisors, and a lot of consultants out there that will help you through that process. So certainly reach out if you ever find yourself in that position. But we look at the ongoing effects of what this no tolerance policy has meant. And I'm going to show you this little Excel sheet here. So fiscal year in government years, remember they start in October the year before and go through September 30th. So we talk about 2022. This would have started October 21 and run through September 2022. Grand total of 92 revocations in 2020. So this would be the first full fiscal year that we saw of inspections under the no tolerance policy. Just so you can see the total number of inspections, warning conferences given, and then also the total number of revocations. So if we jump into fiscal year 2023, hold on to your hats, grand total of revocation jumps to 173. Okay. If we jump into what is our year to date in 2024, August and September are not over yet. We are already up to 173 total revocations for the year. So until looking at the trend of numbers, until these 2 months are done for this fiscal year, we're 100% going to be in excess of 200 revocations for the year. Now, 173, when we look at the grand total number of FFLs that are in business, the thousands of FFLs, this may seem like a small number, a very small percentage. But if we look at how those numbers have climbed, I don't have a full listing for 2021 year, but to give you kind of reference from where we are 2024 now, looking back to 2021, there was only like 31 revocations in 2021. Now, granted, that was coming off of COVID, so there was some restricted activity in there. Keep in mind the no tolerance policy didn't get announced till June until June of 2021. So we really didn't see that effect really come in until later in that year. But that is a dramatic increase in the number of revocations and inspections. So inspections are occurring at a more regular rate. There are more warning conferences going out. There are 100% more. There are more revocations going out. So I'm just looking from 2022 to 2024. They've doubled. So that's kind of where we're at year to date. And the other thing these numbers don't tell us too is the number of dealers who have surrendered their license and have gone out of business as a result. Again, this is another ATF link. This is where you can go and get the month-to-month results of those revocations that I just showed you. And an interesting number I just want to show down here at the bottom, and this is a slight little blurb from 2023. Licenses surrendered / out of business. Over 1,300 FFLs surrendered their licenses and went out of business last year, the last fiscal year. Now, this is a lot of dealers who are going either they've gotten some kind of warning conference, they've gotten some kind of letter, and they just went, "This isn't worth it. I'm out," and they're just giving up their licenses and moving on. This is a bad number. And if I want to be a conspiracy theorist and talk about if we have an administration that is anti-gun and can't do anything legislatively within the gun world to accomplish what they want in their anti-gun wish list, how do they help drive and lower gun sales and put that effect on the gun sales? And if you can make the business so hard to stay in, that's a potential result you see. So yeah, don't just surrender your license if you think you get a warning. Get help, fight it as best you can, and stick with it. And like I said, if all goes out well, 100% it can come out, hopefully come out in your favor. But don't just give up.
Real quick, Tony, everything you're saying's spot on, and I am, as the resident conspiracy theorist, I have not promoted you to the rank of conspiracy theorist. But in all seriousness, we're in an industry, any regulated industry, the regulation is a constraint on it to begin with, right? So when you go into it like that, a lot of people may be saying, well, why are they, they're auditing me. The whole thing is set up for that. You know what I mean? It's like any regulatory agency is going to put up more roadblocks. And this is not anything against any regulatory agencies. I mean, I'm just a dude, right? But you have to admit that for any business to succeed, it has to produce something that will in turn bring in revenue. Right? That's how any market works, whether you're under a communist regime or a capitalist regime. In order to have your business succeed, you have to be bringing in funds. You have to, make yourself viable. It's the same with regulatory agencies, right? Mm-hmm. So for them to say, hey, we're viable, don't get rid of our jobs, they're going to start doing stuff like this, right? And that's what all those regulations are for. You wonder why, you may be pulled. It's the same with the police. You may be pulled over by 4 different cops. 3 of them give you a ticket and 1 don't. You're right. Still breaking. You were still pulled over for a reason. It's just, what kind of mood are they in? We're just dealing with human beings, and it's the sad part of it. And nothing against anybody in those regulated industries or the regulators. I'm on our side. Obviously, I can't stand when they tie our hands behind our backs, and then 3 months later, the whole thing, whatever they were doing, is overturned. I may have made a huge financial mistake, and I'm not for that, right? But it's the world we live in right now. And if you're being audited, or if you're having these meetings, or there's a threat, that's why Tony's here. So please utilize him. He's got a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and you don't have to go into these battles alone. We're part of your team, right?
Yeah.
So
and like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. But again, if we start to compare percentages, I want to say there's I think one of the last numbers I read, there was over 50% of inspected FFLs make it through their inspections with no violations. So 100% it's doable, and 100%
Right.
the majority of people are doing that. And you can do it. Like the key is to know what they're going to look for and know what those catch points are and be aware if they are, and prevent having those errors going on in the future. And we talk about it, and it's like I said, I'm not bad mouthing anybody who works for the ATF, any inspector. I've known a great number of those guys, and a lot of them have been good people. But the mindset of particularly IOIs in the past has been to help FFL stay compliant. The whole goal was largely help them keep in business and help teach them how to do things right and stay in compliance and conduct business within regulations. And that's kind of the mind shift with the no tolerance. There's definitely been a mind shift, whether IOIs are buying into it and are leaning heavy-handed, whether some might be, or whether or not there's the scenario where their hands are just tied in terms of how they're reporting things. There is a potential shift in that, and it's something to just be mindful of.
And
Okay.
to James, you're absolutely correct, and I think that's why Tony's got the compliance corner. If you haven't heard about it, you need to. We're trying to put out a video a week where he covers something pertinent to our industry. And maybe that's something that he can dive a little bit deeper on in one of those 10-minute segments where you go in, Tony, and you talk about, hey, here's the reason. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks, right? But the percentages are important. And again,
yeah. But the bottom line is there is an increase. Has inspection activity increased over what it has been in past years? Yes. Has the number of revocations increased? Yes, they have. They are being more stringent on these points, specifically these kind of points, and we'll talk about kind of some of the reasons and the things that are popping up here now.
Right. And for Steven Schwartz, hey, don't tell me who I can have on my council. And don't tell me how I need to. I'm not going to promote Tony until he is absolute 100% bought in to all the conspiracies that I believe.
Steven, I try not to be a conspiracy. I really don't. But
hey, I'll be honest with you. Tony. It's not that I'm a conspiracy theorist. You need to go back and look at the origins of the term conspiracy theorist to understand why it's such a negative connotation. And I'm not going to get into it, but it's okay to question things, people.
Yeah,
even if people call you a conspiracy theorist, if the sheep are saying that the wolves are out to kill them, they really are. No, but seriously, it's not fair. Steven, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Shoot me a link to the exact thing you're talking about. No. So Tony, I'm gonna get off so that you can, because it looks like you're getting ready to present, and I don't want my face to be associated with the PowerPoint.
You're all good.
In the pain of a PowerPoint. So if you need me, I am literally right here, but I'm just gonna remove my face.
Yep. Yeah, well, watch questions for me too, because I'm gonna have a hard time reading questions too as they're rolling.
I'll do it. We'll go back at the very end. We'll go through both of us because there may be some things that I don't understand, and we'll make sure we take care of it. But also, people, remember, compliance corner. Ask Tony, hey, can you do a video on this or this or this? Because there's a lot of times we don't know what you guys want. And this is the perfect opportunity to get an expert like Tony to focus on an issue that you're concerned with and have him do a video on it. So be thinking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I 100%, I don't intend to death by PowerPoint here. Understand this. I do this so it keeps me on track, so I don't sidetrack and go down a rabbit hole. But these are the points we're going to talk about predominantly today, the 1 through 5 being those 5 original identified violations along with the other follow-up ones. So we'll kind of talk about these a little point by point. And if questions come up, we can certainly deal with them. So one of the first ones that come up, again, is the refusing to permit the ATF to conduct an inspection. This is they've shown up to allow, and for some reason, you as an FFL just block their entrance and aren't going to let them do an inspection. You're going to get revoked for that. In fact, they are, by law, they're allowed 1 warrantless inspection a year. If you block them or don't allow them access, they will return with a warrant. They will do their inspection one way or the other, and generally you're gonna get inspected. Remember, when we fill out for your license, you're establishing hours of availability and stuff like that, and they're gonna go back to that to uh, to say, hey, we're here to, you need to be available, and everything needs to be available for us to do this. So this is really a let them in, let them do their inspection, make it easy for them, get them in, get them out as fast as you can. There's I've talked to a lot of FFLs that, hey, we just try to make it as uncomfortable for them as we can. Why? Get them in, get them out, keep them happy, and move them on, so you can get back to business and back to life without them. Um, Failing to respond to a trace request. This is another big one. If you don't know what a trace request is, that is when a firearm has been recovered somewhere out in the world, typically by law enforcement, and they're tracking the history from manufacturer all the way down to what is the final recorded sale of it, to understand where that gun has been, where it's gone to. If you get trace requests are sent out by the National Tracing Center, the NTC. They'll come to you in the form of phone calls, sometimes emails, if they have that record. In the past, working for FFLs, I've talked to the NTC and have specifically gotten specific emails put on so I can get those email requests. But you're required to respond to these within 24 hours. And you have to have a means to respond to them. I'm on vacation is not going to be accepted. You've got to have a contingency plan to be allowed to be able to do that. Good news is, if you're using Coreware, it being web-based, if you got your email and you can see the trace request and you can fire up your laptop, you can typically access those records and respond to that trace request. And I've done that on a number of occasions. All right. So moving on from that, we're talking about transferring a firearm to a prohibited person. This sounds, and a lot of these sound very easy at face value, until we really get into what are the nuts and bolts and what do they consider transferring to a prohibited person. And here's some other points to get a little bit more specific. So again, anybody who's otherwise barred from owning firearms and transferring those to them would be generally across the board the violations. Again, you ran a background check and someone got denied and you transfer the firearm anyway. The disqualifier questions, the 21A through 21N, I think I need to update. I think we're on M now, whatever it is, because they've added the two. But if the customer fills out the 4473 and is self-identifying as a prohibited person by answering one of those questions wrong, and you still transfer the firearm with that question being answered wrong, again, that would be a violation. Residency and stuff like that, especially when we're dealing with non-U.S. citizens and non-immigrant aliens. So, like, resident card holders are generally treated like residents. There's a little bit more information you got to record on the 4473. But then the non-immigrant aliens, the one on work visas and school visas and stuff like that, that you transfer without getting the right documentation, verification, and all that can still be that could come up as a violation. Other than long guns to under 21 years of age. Now, granted, I know there's states out there that are 21 for everything. There are some states that don't allow whatever, but when we look at the general federal law, 18 to 21 can buy long guns, and 21 over for handguns. So if you were to sell a handgun to someone who's 18, 19 across the counter, that's huge. And transferring other than long guns to out-of-state residents. So again, an out-of-state resident comes in and wants to buy a handgun. Cool, we can sell it to you and ship it to your FFL. But again, across the counter transfer to that would be considered a violation. And then number 8, the failure to identify, intercede, and straw purchase scenarios. And Stephen, I see your comment there. A huge gray area, 100% a huge gray area. And typically, what I've seen IOIs do is when they cruise through a bound book report of the last 12 months, they do like a comparison to look, are there a whole bunch of guns sold to any one person or stuff like this, and they will sometimes start asking you questions like that. So 100%, number 8, 100% a huge gray area on if that's something they can prove or not, but understand they're looking at it. They will kind of look through your bound book and come up with questions if they see something that could be questionable. So just be aware. Okay. Um, Failing to conduct a required background check. So again, face value seems very simple, seems very straightforward. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. Not completing a 4473 or having an incomplete 4473. You got to remember, for the longest time, um, the 4473 was the background check. Remember, the Brady bill didn't go into effect until 90 something. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. But prior to that, before the Nix was established and all that, the 4473 was the background check, and in some ways, it is still considered. It is a lot of times still considered a part of it. So, not completing that or leaving it incomplete, required information incomplete, is a potential violation. Obviously, we talk about performing what the mandatory background checks are. And just transferring it out with some exemption that shouldn't have applied can be an issue. Failure to record your NTN or your POC number. Now, with FBI NICs, an NTN number is 9 digits long, and it's a mix of letters and numbers. I have watched IOIs when they're doing scrolling through 4473s to look at that box and literally count those numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 8 numbers, you failed to run a background check. If you have 10 numbers, you failed to run a background check. If accidentally posted the wrong number, and I think I talked about this somewhere else, record the wrong or incorrect transaction number. I've seen salesmen accidentally copy and paste a driver's license number into the NTN box. That's not the right number. That would be considered you didn't run a background check. So there's backup. So some things you can do to prevent that. It's if you get those NICS confirmation sheets, if you're able to print those or run yourself a query at the end of every night of the NICS checks that been run in NICS, and store them somewhere, stash them. So if it ever comes a question of did you actually run this NTN, you can go back and find that information and show, yes, here we did it, here it is. That's something that's very helpful that I've seen as a very good tool to help combat those. Expired concealed carry permits for the NICS exemption. Again, generally just kind of the general comment, no expired documents. If you got any document that's got a expiration date and it's expired, don't use it. Don't use it. Even if it's their primary driver's license ID, stop the sale, make them go get their new ID. Also with concealed carry permits, remember, they're only good for 5 years from the date of issue for the NICS exemption. Okay. I know there are some states that may issue concealed weapons permits for longer periods of time, and they're good at that level for the purposes of carrying concealed. I think there's a couple still out there that still offer a lifetime. But remember, they're only valid for the NICS exemption for the first 5 years after their date of issue. So if you're using that concealed weapons permit for that exemption and it's over 5 years old, that can be considered not running a background check. Also, out of state concealed carry permits. This has happened before. You get somebody who's from out of state, they're buying maybe a shotgun, and they present a concealed weapons permit from their state of residence. Can't do that either. The concealed for the NICS exemption, it must be an in-state concealed weapons permit. So I live in Arizona. If I fly out to our home office out in North Carolina for business, walk into a gun store and want to buy a rifle while I'm there, if they accept my Arizona concealed weapons license to allow that gun to go out the door without running a background check, they have failed. They have committed a violation. Okay. Oops, sorry. Background check is over 30 days old. So if you run a background check, we all should know background check, once initiated, hits that 30-day mark, it's considered expired. I know there's some weird state stuff out there if you're in one of those weird states and delving into that. Again, I'm dealing with the general overall. But once you hit that 30 days from the date of submission to the date of communicating that background check to NICS, that background check is expired. If you were to transfer after those 30 days, after that background check is expired, then that would be considered you transferred without a background check. You can rerun. If you hit that 30-day point, that customer still wants that gun, generate a new background check. You can keep the same 4473. How generally I would kind of recommend it, depending on your volume and keeping track of those records. If it's easier for you just to cancel everything out, start a new 4473, there's nothing wrong with that either. Just know that 30 days is going to be a point. We got to stop hitting that wheel. So we talk about the Brady date. So run a background check. We're talking to basic NIC stuff. Background check. If a customer gets delayed, the government has 3 business days to look into the background of the firearm purchaser to see if there's anything in there that would constitute them being prohibited. After that 3 days, state laws allowing, after that 3 days, as a dealer, you can transfer that firearm without any other repercussions. It's not considered doing anything wrong. However, if you were to transfer prior to that Brady date, and NICS actually gives you that date, but if you were to transfer prior to that date, early, again, that's a violation. And another point that comes into play is the LEOSA or law enforcement ID on the background check. If you don't know what HR 218, the Law Enforcement Officer Safeties Act, what that was, basically what that is identified active law enforcement with active IDs and retired, or I think it's retired, or if you have like over 15 years of service and you meet the training requirements, your law enforcement ID or those LEOSA creds count as basically a nationwide concealed carry permit. LEOSA does not allow exemption to the GCA for the purpose of buying firearms. So if you got a law enforcement officer who is buying a gun across the counter, and it's not an agency purchase on an agency letterhead, then yes, they must do a background check unless they actually have the state concealed carry permit. Their law enforcement ID does not allow them in and of itself to pass that the background check for the NICS exemption. Tim, yes, 100%. With the Bipartisan Safer Community Act, the under 21 purchasers for rifles, long guns, they now have the option to extend the Brady date background check up to 10 days. So when those purchasers come in, understand they will 100% get the initial 3-day delays. They will get a delay. If you have an under 21 purchaser that you run a background check and they don't get delayed, call NICS. Trust me, been through that. But they will get the delay, and then within those 3 days, they can have option to, again, approve if so be it, or they can choose the option to extend it an additional 7 days beyond that, which if you remove holidays and weekends becomes like a 2-week wait. And what they're doing is they're looking for that is to give time to look kind of into juvenile records to see if there's been any history there that, if committed as an adult, would prohibit them from owning firearms. So good point bringing that up, Tim. Cool. Then we talk about falsifying records, such as, any other records. The most commonly it comes up with is the 4473. So creating false documentation or making false statements relating to firearm sales or inventory. There was a case here locally to me where a dealer, an FFO, was basically creating 4473s for people, then transferring firearms, and one of those firearms got used in an assault on a law enforcement officer. So yeah, don't do that. If you're falsifying the NICS result, so maybe they got denied and the dealer decides to just cover it up and marks proceed, obviously, bad thing. Of course, any other false information on the ATF 4473, or recording firearms transactions under a different person, altering or destroying firearms records. The whole concept of even bound to book, as it said, is that those are bound, they are permanent, so you either have to have them be that permanent or allow, especially like in the cases of us with an electronic system and coreware, if there are changes made, those got to be recorded, and then we're not just erroneously just erasing records or allowing records to disappear. The big one though is the B and D. Yeah, James, good reasons for revoke, right? Yeah, there's some obviously. What was the phrase I heard from one? It was like, well, yeah, he's a good guy, but just has no business being an FFL. I think that was what somebody told me in relation to one of those cases. Yeah, but anyway, section B or D. We know those are, you should know if you've been selling guns for any period of time, that is a customer only sections. The gun seller themselves cannot fill those out or edit them or correct them for the gun buyer. Another one that has popped up is adding firearms after the transfer has been completed. So we're talking your 4473 is done, Section E is signed, you're closed out, everything else like that. Then as you're handing them their firearm, they're like, cool, I want to get another one. At that point, it's a new transaction. There's several links in the ATF that talks about what they consider a transaction or not. And once that Section E is signed, where the gun seller has signed off indicating that we've transferred this firearm, that transaction is over. If they want to do something else, it's a new transaction. Start them over on a new 4473. And failing to record firearm transactions in the A&D book. And in another part of the country, there's a dealer I knew of that got hemmed up with this. He was taking in consignment firearms and not adding them into his A&D book. What he would do is he would take the firearms in and the consignment arms in and sit on them. And if he sold them, he would add them in and then dispose them. But then if the customer came back later, the original owner of the firearm came back later and wanted the gun back and it didn't sell, he would literally just hand them the gun back and be gone. So numerous problems there. But yeah, got to get those into your A&D books. End of business day, I believe, is the recommendation. Some exemptions for longers if you've got the commercial records and information on the firearm. Generally, best practice is to try to get the guns acquired same day. Then we talk about failing to account for firearms. Now we're talking about way different slide. Weird. Failing to account for firearms. This is generally going to come down to your inventory, your bound book inventory, that serial number inventory. We know when IOIs come in for an inspection. If they come in for an inspection, one of the first things they're going to do is conduct an inventory and make sure your bound book matches what's actually in the store. Having guns in your inventory that aren't there is a bad thing. And not having guns that should be there is a bad thing. So that can 100% turn into a revocable offense. So just account for those appropriately.
Hey, Tony.
Sure.
It worked. I said, I bet if we make this slide look like this, it will completely derail anything he's talking about.
Probably, yeah.
It worked. That was awesome, dude.
See, this is their effort to keep me on track, so not let me go sidetrack and go down the holes.
No, seriously. And Tony spent a whole lot of time making this, making these slides.
Yeah, about 5 minutes, right?
he said, "Oh, look at that. That's a slide I don't remember making."
Yep.
No, I'm just
joking. But James, your question that popped up there, because signer wants the firearm back, have to run a background check on the owner. Yeah, 4473 and background check. It doesn't. Yeah, if a gun's going back to an owner, consignment, pawn consignment, whatever, the 4473 and background check. The only exemption to that is like work order guns, gunsmithing guns. If it's going back to the original owner that dropped it off, you don't have to do the 4473 and a background check. You can return it back to the original owner without that. So, yep. Cool.
So some of these things seem like they're common sense, Tony.
Yeah, know what? And what do we always say about common sense?
It's not so common. Hey, and you know what? It could just be, you're busy. If you're at the shop, you guys sell like 50 guns a day and there's only 3 or 4 of you, you could miss things. So maybe just have a checklist. Tony, I know we made a checklist on one of your compliance corner videos. So maybe we'll make that available in the description of this video on YouTube. So if you're watching this anywhere else, go to YouTube and look in the description and we'll have your checklist for.
To be honest, I have to finish that.
No, and that's fine. It would be cool though, just to have something for people to, maybe you could do it in a way where they could just download a file and then print it out and have it laminated, and all their employees could have and hey, this is your boot camp, right? For 2 or 3 months, you carry this around. And if I ask you any of the, your general orders, then you need to know these things. So it's just one of those things where you have to, if you don't do it every day, you're going to forget and you can make mistakes. It's like anything else in life. So we'll try to help you with that.
Yep. Yep, and Steven, you're 100% right. Has to be the one who dropped it off the original owner. And if you're just sending it back to a different person on the work order, there would have to be a 4473 and background check. So yeah, 100% right, Steven, on the gunsmithing thing. Has to be to the original owner, the same person who dropped it off to you on those that exception. Cool. Hopefully, I'm still not boring anybody. I know I hate the sound of my own voice, so hopefully everyone's still with us here. But we're almost through this list.
I'm so glad I was just muted.
Yeah, right. We talk about failure to verify and document a buyer eligibility. This is verifying the ID documents you're collecting, and the most common thing is the ID documents. There's something wrong, something missing. It doesn't have their full legal name or doesn't have their current residence address, and the supplemental documentation that needs to be attained to verify that and documented in the boxes isn't done correctly or isn't collected at all. I get a lot of questions about when we talk about something like this. Well, how would they know? Common thing is probably because people keep attaching documents they don't need to the 4473. Neither the primary ID you're collecting or the supplemental document needs to be attached to the 4473. We commonly recommend that you collect all that kind of stuff as copies as a separate business record. A lot of guys call it a buddy file or something like that. Keep all that separate that you can track down later, but you don't have to attach it because 100% they will. IOIs, if it's attached to the 4473, they will look at it and compare it to what's on the 4470 to look to see if if it's right and if it's collected appropriately. Okay, and general my advice, and I think we did a little 10-minute snip on this previously, but this is back to that. Verify this before you ever put a pen to paper or a keystroke to computer when it comes to filling out a 4473. Someone hands me ID. First questions I ask after looking at the expiration date and looking at the pictures to see if it's them. Very first questions I always ask when it comes to selling guns: is this your full legal name, and is this your current residence address? And if any of the answers to those questions are no, we don't do anything until we resolve that and get what we need to move that forward. So moving on. Failure to maintain records needed for successful firearms training. So we all know back with the Gun Control Act put in the requirements for firearms markings. So make, model, serial number, caliber, make, models, caliber, and there's one I'm forgetting. I'm just mind blanking on. Oh, there it is, right there in front of me. Manufacturer. Sorry, it's all right in front of me. Yeah, see, I need to follow my own PowerPoints. See what you did to me, Joel? You took me off the rails. That's why I do this. But that's all that required information to identify the firearm, and why that's there is 100% for firearms tracing. It's why they implemented that so they can trace the history of the firearms. So when we talk about failing to maintain those records, this all comes down to your bound booking, having that information recorded accurately. So acquisitions, again, same day or by close of business the next day. Same thing with dispositions. Yes, you have 7 days to dispose a firearm. After it's been transferred. So you can certainly use that within Coreware. We have a pending feature to where you complete the orders instead of going straight to disposition. It'll drop the firearms into kind of a pending status. The key is if you're going to do that and use kind of that time frame to dispose, and there's some large volume dealers that will use that as a means to have another person, do kind of their own compliance check, their own audit of those 4473s to make sure they're all good before they hit the final disposition button. And that's fine, but just know those records have to be kept separate from your other records files. So you can't just if they're not disposed, you just can't take that stack of 44 and stick it in the banker box with all the other ones that you've already disposed out. Keep them separate until you've made that disposition. And do that. And again, that's how that pending feature works. It'll hold them in that pending status, so they are in the system, separated out until you go in and do the actual final disposition piece. Accounting for all ATF Form 447.3s, denied, cancels, whatever else. Keep track of those. Don't just dispose your cancel. If a customer fills out a form or gets through Section B, then decides, before you get your background check or even after you submit it, decides they don't want the gun, they change their minds. Don't just can those 4473s. Make sure you're following through to record information on those, and you've got to maintain those, and keep them keep them available for potential inspection. And update ATF 4473s accordingly when it comes to the NICS information. So especially if you facilitate the Brady date transfer, so the 3 or 10 day in a case of like an 18, 19-year-old goes by and you transfer the firearm, and then a couple days later the result comes back in as either approved or denied. Go back to that 4473 and update that data. And in the case of denials, follow the instructions. Typically, you're going to get instructions on that to send that into, I think it was the deny fax line email. You would send that into NICS. NICS reports that to, I believe, the local field office to deal with recovery of those firearms and things like that. So, but make sure you're updating those 4473s accordingly. Even a canceled one. If you've gotten to the point you've submitted a background check, person got delayed, and that's cool. I don't want to wait. I want my money back. Whatever the case, they're just not going to wait, and they leave. Still track that transaction and update that 4473, even though you know it's going to be a canceled file, and record that information. Make sure that stays completed. Cool.
Hey, can you look at Steven's question before we move on? Because I think it was pertaining to what you're talking about here. Maybe it's not. I just wanted you to get to it as quick as possible.
Okay, so if you have a computer in your shop available for customer use to pull records up and stuff like that, and they pull something up and they're accessing it and voluntarily accessing it, I haven't heard any issues that that's fine. The one thing you want to be cautious of, you can't tell them to do it. Offer it as a service, but make sure you don't have salesmen that are going, log into your DOK account, change your address, then print out the result. If all they need to do, if they're volunteering, like the customer is like, hey, do you have a computer I can log in and print out my stuff? That's safe. But if you have staff that are going, get on that computer, log in, change your address, and print me out the confirmation, that would be a bad thing. Okay. Same thing as like coaching on the disqualifier questions. So there's just a fine line there on what to do. But does that make sense, Steve? Hopefully, we'll see if he responds. All right, the 3310 forms, 3310.4 and the 3310.12. These are the report of the multiple gun sales forms. So just to clarify, because this comment always comes up, 3310 forms is the handgun report. This is required nationwide, and it involves all handguns, regardless of action and regardless of caliber. All right, and it's the sale of any 2 or more over a 5-day period. And again, that's going to be business days for you, the FFL, not the federal business days as like calculated for a Brady date. Okay. And that is nationwide. That is required to be reported end of business day, by end of business day, the day the qualifying transaction occurred. So you want to make sure that happens. The 3310.12, this is for certain rifles. And when we say certain rifles, it's semi-automatic rifles larger than 22 caliber, but including 223, 5.56 with the ability to accept detachable magazines. Bolt action rifles don't qualify. Lever action don't qualify. Shotguns don't qualify. And this is only required in your southern border states. So if you are in California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, this is for you. There has been a recent update to this as well, too. So previously for those border states with the 3310.12, manufacturers and importers, your 07s and 08s, were excluded from that. As of October 1, they no longer are. As of October 1, the manufacturers and importers must also report the certain rifle sales as well too, and same requirement: the 2 or more within 5 business days reported by the end of business day for the qualifying transaction. If that's confusing, drop me a message. But hopefully that all makes sense. Another thing is your local Clio. Well, and in Coreware, our system searches for that and everything. We are actually making some improvements to how the system processes the 3310 form. So we are trying to solidify it and making that a more rock solid. We should see that improvement here shortly. I believe they're testing it now. Your local Clio or designated state official on the form. So 3310 for the handgun one, the 3310-4 gets emailed to the ATF and to a local law enforcement agency as designated on wherever you're located. You've got to designate that. Our system CoreWare is automatically programmed with the ATF information, but there's a setting in your location settings to where you must add that law enforcement agency in their email in there. So make sure you do that. Now, if you're sending them to a law enforcement agency and you get a phone call that says, we don't want this, and there's no other agency for you to send it to, keep sending it to them anyway. From the FFL Business Squad, you're required to send it to them. So I don't care what they do with it afterwards. Just make sure you're sending it and protect yourself. Okay. And then when we're talking about gun shows, if you visit those gun shows, make sure you're referring back to who is the jurisdiction in that gun show area. Okay. And I always recommend, even though, and this is going to be a question, even though our system is designed to do it, I mean, I always say I trust but verify. Have a means to go back through your records and look and search, run a bound book report by name and or something along those lines, and do a double check every once in a while. Make sure you're not missing anything. Okay. I'm always going to recommend that. Okay. And then we're almost done, guys. Last slide. So prior ATF administrative action. So if you get inspected and you wind up in a warning conference, expect that you're going to get re-inspected in 12 months. Usually 12 to 18 months is usually the time frame, but you are going to get inspected again in a relatively short period of time. If you have any repeat violations from that previous inspection that wound you up in that situation, that's going to be considered willful, could be considered willful, and you're most likely going to get a revocation notice out of that. So just be aware, if you go through an inspection and you're cited, you receive violations, you end up in a warning conference, any kind of corrective action or administrative action from the ATF, make sure those instances do not reoccur. Definitely put something in place to fix those. And just as a discussion point, because I think I made a mention earlier, there's some presenters out there that have taken this list from even 10 to 11. The 11th one, as we have been talking about it, is FFLs or stores that also sell firearms have FFL as part of their employing people who would be prohibited from owning firearms. So when we look, and for that to work, you can technically do it, but you have to ensure there is a very clear separation of duties to make sure those people do not have access to handle firearms and ammunition. So if you're a small mom and pop shop, that may not be able to happen. But when we talk about like large, big box stores, Cabela's, the Bass Pros, Sportsman's Warehouse, stuff like that, you could have someone who's got a felony conviction that might work in apparel and handle apparel. And as long as you can clearly separate those divisions and the business can guarantee he's not handling firearms, that can be done. But if you have somebody who's got something on their record that would make them prohibited, 100%, they cannot access firearms and ammunition. Okay. And then final slide, I'll let you take pictures of this or look at this. These are the most common when we come to the actual specific CFR being Code of Federal Regulation. This would be the most common thing cited specifically when it comes to the end of an inspection and that. So if you want to know kind of what that specific code is, what it says, this is what I'd look at. When you look at CFRs, anything 478, that's going to be your GCA stuff. And if you see anything 479, that would be your NFA, your National Firearm Act stuff. So, and that's it. I'm done through the slides, Joel.
So anything that Tony mentioned that he would share or to take pictures of or whatnot, we'll have this in the description on YouTube. So if you're watching this anywhere else, just go back to YouTube, scroll down in the description, and we'll have some notes. We'll have links to whatever we want you to go look at. And yeah, it'll be all good. We'll also have this. I'm going to turn Tony into a bot. So if you have questions later on, you can go back and ask the bot. And hopefully it gives you right answers too. Just remember, anytime you're using any of these new technologies, don't completely trust them. It's like anything else online. It may not be true. I saw that quote. I think Abraham Lincoln tweeted that back in 2016. didn't he? Everything online is true or may not be true or something like that. So just keep that in mind. Um, Tony, I think what we need to do, and I was going to do this offline, but I want everybody to hear. So maybe they'll hold you to it because it's all kind of on you instead of me. I think we come up with some sort of a kit, right? For maybe new employees or even seasoned veterans in this industry where, hey, if you want, you can just take this little card, print it out, laminate it, and you've got your checklist. You've got everything that you really need to do in regards to, hey, how to properly make a sale, right? How to properly, I mean, we can provide information because a lot of times we all know, regulatory, even when you're following the rules, you may fall somewhere because it's a regulatory
Yeah.
agency that's creating these things and there's nothing really written in stone,
Yep.
right? So,
Yep.
yeah. So we want to, I would like for you, Tony, to maybe you figure out what the industry standard is on, the proper way to go about doing all these things that you talked about. And let's come up with some documentation for all these people that they can then, give access to their employees that will keep everybody in line, right? That will
There.
keep
Yep.
everybody here. Some things that to keep an eye out for. And if there are already resources out there, it doesn't matter. You'll put something together so that we can, this is coming from the mind of Tony, right? Because you did this for years, you were in the industry, and you may know some things that other people don't know. So we're just going to add to whatever's already available out there, and I think it will be really good.
Yep.
I can
So
you go ahead?
I was going to say, and on a side note, kind of a top point of discussion. Did you see I believe a couple days ago, the amicus brief out of the Supreme Court that got passed down to the Fifth Circuit?
Saying that the machine gun thing was unconstitutional.
I'm talking about the Freeman, the amicus brief is. Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, I think my
Are we
service.
freezing up, Joel?
Yeah, my service did something weird. Are you talking about the where they talked about the machine guns? Whatever it wasn't
No.
constitutional, or
So, yeah, so no. There's another, so the Freeman receiver rule that talked about taking like the kits, the PMF kits, and stuff like that. There's some legal challenges to that came out like in 2021, 2022, whatever it was. And it changed some record keeping requirements and things like that. So that's working its way up through the courts. There's some legal challenge to that, I believe, in the Fifth Circuit. There's an amicus brief that came down through from the Supreme Court, anticipating this is going to go to the Supreme Court. So that's an amicus brief, kind of an opinion. It's a third party kind of side group that's giving an opinion of it. That amicus brief came out that in light of recent Supreme Court rulings, even from Brew and Heller, and even the most recent one that kind of shot down the Chevron deference, they're calling this the amicus brief is calling the rule unconstitutional now. So there's some weird, interesting events going on. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
so anything we talk about in this webinar, literally just scroll down and you should see a link to it, because Tony's going to provide me a link to the for those of you that are redneck like me, we pronounce it amicus. So you may amicus or amicus.
I mean, I guess whatever. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm not going to say I pronounce things right. I just read it for understanding, man.
No. I'm not saying that. You can literally be saying it right. I'm just saying I've heard it this way. So for those of you that have heard it that way, that's what that is. Amicus or amicus. And that's a very positive. That's a positive thing that's happening. Yes, some weird things are happening, Tony, and maybe that would be a good compliance corner episode where we take 10 minutes and take the top 3 weird things that have been happening. It's like, why would this happen in this industry? Because again, like I began with, any business has to create a good to bring in revenue, right? And the business of a regulatory agency, they create regulations that bring in revenue in that way. So why would they try to? It's like they're putting themselves out of business, right? They're ruling against what you would think that they wouldn't be ruling against. So maybe that's a positive. I mean, because there
I
are a lot
think
of people out there that
I think
go
from an
ahead.
industry perspective, 100% is going to be a positive.
Yes.
Because it even goes into details on, it's prior law was 20 years. 20 years was the limit. Used to be the limit for holding on to 4473s and holding on to records. Anything 20 over 20 years old, you didn't have to retain anymore. With the frame and receiver rule, that changed back to life of the FFL.
Wow.
And they're even challenging that in this brief, which is it's really interesting. So
Yeah.
be curious to
Wow.
see how that plays out. If that will sway the Fifth Circuit to make some decisions, but that will probably a good indicator that if it goes to SCOTUS, what it'll kind of end up being, hopefully.
Right. And I think that's where we'll begin to end, because he's talking about judges, he's talking about SCOTUS, he's talking about all these things, and we have an election coming up, and I don't care who you vote for, but you do need to start paying attention and then vote accordingly. That's all I'm saying. Pay attention and then vote accordingly.
Yeah. Who knows if one certain person wins, we don't know how it'll play out. It'll get worse. All we know, but if the other person wins, we know this is going to stay what it is, and this is going to stay over our heads forever because they're not going to want to change it.
Right. So, yeah, just pay attention. I've noticed that that's a real big issue in the United States. We have it so good. We don't really have to worry about where we're going to get our next meal, right? We're not worried about things that a lot of people on this planet are worried about. We are very, very, very comfortable. And that's usually when people are taken advantage of. It's like we've taken a national... no, I'm not going to say that. Woo! I just did a Biden. Almost went there. I need an ice cream cone. Hey, again, I would like to mention... We're going to be, I want you guys to take advantage of the webinar replay site. We'll be sharing that in our Core Weekly newsletter. Go back and question some of these webinars. Again, I think you should go back and look at the Core Clear webinar. If you don't have an ATM in your shop, I don't know what you're thinking, right? We've got, there's a plan where, we put it in, and there's a plan where you can put it in and put your own stuff in there. I mean, it's just, it literally, it wouldn't cost a penny.
Not just a shop. I've actually talked to a couple of dealers that do gun shows, that they are actually talking about getting mobile ATMs and hauling those things to the gun shows with them.
Are you kidding me?
Swear.
That's thinking outside the box. Now, I want to show you, I questioned that bot that I showed you earlier, and I said, what are some ways to get the word out that we have an ATM? One of the things, which made no sense, but it was a really good idea, it's wrap the ATM. So you can get one of these ATMs, wrap that freaking thing, and wherever you take it, it's like, oh, that's the bank of the gun house or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, please look at this stuff. The world's radically changing, and you don't have to be left behind. There's so many exciting things going on, so many everything's just changing, and it doesn't have to be really bad. It doesn't have to be scary. Just pay attention, and we'll help you as much as we can. Keep an eye out for the next episode of Compliance Corner, and I don't know what Tony's going to be talking about, but I'm sure it will be exciting. Tony, let's introduce those that may not watch Compliance Corner to the last thing that we do on every episode. Last words from Tony.
My last words? All right. I may not be entirely mentally stable, but at least I don't own a pair of Crocs.
Wait a minute. I can check both those boxes. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We really do sincerely appreciate all of you. And we can't wait to see you in the next one. The next one's probably going to be in the next week or so. We're going to start highlighting some different distributors that we offer within CoreForce. So that's going to be really exciting, because a distributor, they're all different, right? So we're going to start highlighting those differences and showing you why you may need to look at others, and it's going to be fun. Also, we're going to have another AI webinar coming up pretty soon. I can't keep up anymore. I used to really have, my algorithms were great. I was able to keep up. I can't anymore. It's freaking crazy. But I do have some things to share that will help you run your business and even help you in your life. So stay tuned for that. With that, we're out of here.
Awesome.
See you guys later.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.